Okay, thanks for tuning in to my YouTube channel again. Today we're going to take another look at Jim Alison's 1966 W1 SS 650 Kawasaki. Now of course Kawasaki based this W1 650cc motor around the original BSA A10 A7 road bike. Now, as you can see on the cases, there is lots of similarities between this Kawasaki motor and the original BSA design. Other than the badge on the casing, it's hard to determine which is which. This is actually the motor prior to its strip down and a rebuild, which of course was performed by Jim's best friend Roy Cumming. Roy did all the engineering work on the engine, and Jim performed all the chassis modifications to make this particular bike. This picture of course is prior to all the modifications being made. This was just a basic layout to see how things were going to fit together on the actual bike. Of course, when the completed bike was finished, it turned into something really special. These pictures were taken in January 2017, more than a year ago. Now at first glance you could see how this machine could be mistaken for an original BSA bike from the 1960s, with the alloy mudguards, the alloy fuel tank, and that beautiful BSA derived Kawasaki motor in the frame. Now before they started the build on this particular project, Jim and Roy both decided that Jim would do all the chassis modifications to the bike, and Roy would concentrate on the stripping and rebuild of that beautiful Kawasaki 650 motor. Now those front forks are of course Italian Serie Anni units. Now naturally some of the internals of the motor were improved by the Kawasaki engineers, like using a single unit pressed steel crankshaft with ball bearings for the big end, when of course the BSA factory were using plain insert bearings on the British version. Now the rear end of the bike was fitted with a pair of those high quality rock shocks, which are excellent fitments for these old classic dirt bikes. Now the front hub is a grey mica brake hub, and just standard off the shelf aluminium classic mudguards fitted to the front and rear. Now the engine lubrication system on this bike has a dry sump configuration, although those highly competent Kawasaki engineers did make some improvements to the ventilation and the oil flow of the motor to improve the engine's reliability. Now Kawasaki also kept the gear shifter on the right hand side of this bike, and the rear brake lever was kept on the left as per the original BSA design. A 530 series drivetrain there to transmit the power to the back wheel from that big 650 Kawasaki motor. Now these exhausts are the original Kawasaki units from the original bike, but Jim decided to get them re-chromed by a local chrome platers, and these were done by Fab Chrome in Cumbernauld here in Scotland. And naturally you'll be able to hear just exactly what they sound like just shortly at the end of this video. Now Jim decided to keep the original 1966 cylinder head on this particular engine rather than go for a 1968 twin carburetor conversion. Now I'm sure you'll admit that it is a beautiful looking twin motor in that Kawasaki frame. Now the fuel tank on this particular bike was purchased from an internet auction site, and it almost fitted straight onto the frame, although a little modification was required to make it a snug fit. Now the oil tank you can see just behind the numbers there, 153, is actually from an old BSA Gold Star that had to be refabricated to fit Jim's machine. Of course, is the oil feed pipes to the engine and that Kawasaki 4-speed gearbox. Another nice view of that handcrafted aluminium fuel tank. The carburetor is a 32mm Mikuni unit. That of course is the Greenmaker rear hub on this Kawasaki. Straight through exhaust pipes, of course, no mufflers on this particular bike. Now the seat base and cover is of course custom made for this bike, and this was done by master upholsterer John Dingwall. Of course, all the smaller items like the gasser, the levers, cables and the rental bars are just basic off-the-shelf motorcycle items. If you didn't know better, you would quite easily say that this was a bike from the 1960s. Another view of that superbly handmade seat and those rock shocks. Now new spokes were fitted to the original rims along with these new motocross tyres and refitted to the bike. Now over a 10-year period, Kawasaki built more than 27,000 of the original road-going version of this particular 650cc bike. And as far as I'm aware, this is the only one that I've seen in this motocross configuration. Now, as the original road-going version of this engine had an alternator fitted to the front of the motor, this of course would not be required on the new Scrambles version, so Jim had to remanufacture these front engine mounting plates. And naturally, because this is of course a twin cylinder engine, there is a very nice symphony played from those twin exhaust pipes, which we'll hear just shortly. Was of course Jim's friend Roy Cumming who did all the engine work on this particular bike. Now Jim of course had to weld a mounting for the rear mudguard on the frame of this bike, as the Kawasaki frame was open at both ends on the original road bike. Another view of the business end of the Kawasaki bike, and as we row up you can see where the mudguard mount that Jim had to weld had been put in place. Now I'm sure if you didn't know any better and someone said to you, "What make of bike is this?" you would probably say, "It's a classic BSA." Of course, the original Kawasaki engine had the Kawasaki name stamped on the casing, but Jim decided to remove this just to keep people guessing. Okay, I think we've covered most parts of the bike now. Let's just take a listen and see exactly what she sounds like.
switch the ignition on.
Well, that would help it there, huh? Oh yeah, fucking. Well, I hope you enjoyed having a look at Jim Alison's W1 SS650 Kawasaki. Stay tuned to my YouTube channel for more classic dirt bikes and classic racing. Thanks for joining us.